In the depths of the earth, many meters below the surface, archaeologists have found something that should not exist, where and how it exists. Evidence of organized, sophisticated, and large-scale mining carried out by civilizations that officially did not possess the technology or organization to do so. But what they discovered afterward would completely change the way we understand not only the distant past, but the entire structure of human history as we know it. The Forgotten Mine is not just a dark pit where primitive men extracted stones. It is proof that the past is much more structured, planned, and mysterious than we were taught in schools. And the evidence is there, waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. We begin on the Sinai Peninsula, a region that for millennia was scoured by Egyptians in search of copper and turquoise. But it is not the copper that interests us now, it is what comes before it. Evidence of mining in Sinai dates back to periods long before dynastic Egypt as we know it. According to archaeologists who studied mining waste deposits in the region, there are signs of extractive activity that precedes by centuries or even millennia what Egyptian records officially recognize. This raises a simple but deeply disturbing question. Who was mining there before? But wait, there is something much more specific that no one talks about regarding these operations. Further south in Nubia, in places like Buhen, Sai, and other regions near the Nile, remains of gold mines have been discovered that caused astonishment when properly excavated. We are not talking about small scattered holes or subsistence operations. We are talking about extraction systems that required knowledge of geology, logistical planning, specialized tools, and coordinated labor on a large scale. The excavations revealed not only the mine hole itself, but work chambers with precisely calculated ceiling height, water drainage systems with channels carved into the rock, evidence of ore processing carried out on site with sedimentation tanks, and even organized shelters to house workers during periods of continuous operation. According to researchers from Oxford University who analyzed these structures in studies published between 2019 and 2023, the sophistication of these works is comparable to that of industrial mining operations from much later periods in history. We are talking about engineering. We are talking about design. We are talking about people who knew exactly what they were doing. Here is the detail that rarely appears in conventional books. Some of these mines operated continuously for more than 500 years. They were not seasonal operations. They were permanent operations, with administrative structure, with work specialization, with ore harvests extracted that totaled tons annually. The gold extracted from a single Nubian mine during a century of continuous operation may have reached 10 tons or more. But to reach these numbers, you need organization that goes far beyond what conventional archaeology admits existed in that period. The official story tells us that ancient work was disorganized, primitive, based on brutal and inefficient slavery. The material reality that archaeologists excavated shows something completely different. Planned systems, professional specialization, infrastructure that suggested long-term vision, and operations that sustained themselves for generations with methodologies that worked. But there is a point where the mystery becomes even deeper. In Timna, in what is now the Negev Desert in Israel, archaeologist Benno Rothenberg dedicated 4 decades to the excavation and analysis of a copper mining complex that dates back to pre-dynastic periods. Rothenberg was not an ordinary researcher. He was one of the first to seriously question when these operations really began. And what he found surprised him. During an excavation in 1970 among the deepest layers of Timna, Rothenberg discovered something that did not fit, structures that seemed to be temples. They were not mines, they were not tools. They were spaces of worship, organized in a ritualistic manner, strategically located within the mining complex. This meant that mining work was not just raw extractivism, it was an activity incorporated into a complete civilizational structure, with religious, administrative, technical, and social components functioning together. Rothenberg took years to fully publish his findings, And when he did, the academic community divided. How was this possible? If there was organized religion associated with mining, it meant there was organized society. And if there was organized society, then the chronology that we all believed was fundamentally wrong. But wait again. Because there is a detail that Rothenberg found and that remains little discussed even today. Within some of the oldest levels of Timna, among copper tools and processed ore waste, fragments of a material were discovered that defied explanation. They were not raw ore. They were not pure copper. They were objects that appeared to have been worked with a precision that should not be possible with the known tools of the time. The work marks suggested an understanding of metallurgy much more advanced than we assumed. Some researchers who analyzed these fragments suggested that there was knowledge of metal alloys, of controlled tempering, of techniques that theoretically were not invented until thousands of years later. No one can fully explain this, and it is precisely there that academic silence becomes significant. Meanwhile, in Nubia, even more recent discoveries are changing the picture. Between 2021 and 2024, expeditions sponsored by the University of Khartoum and the University of Cambridge identified new mining complexes in the regions of Wadi Alaki and Wadi Gabgaba. These complexes, unlike Timna, did not only mine gold. They processed the gold in loco using chemical separation techniques that suggest knowledge of how to use mercury, lead, and other agents to purify the ore. According to reports published in 2023, analysis of processing waste revealed concentrations of elements indicating sophisticated refining processes. The question that arises is uncomfortable. How did these civilizations know these techniques? Where did they learn? And most importantly, why was this knowledge lost, forgotten, or worse, deliberately ignored by conventional archaeology for so long? The true mystery deepens when we observe how these ores traveled. Nubian gold did not remain in Nubia. Chemical analyses of gold artifacts found at archaeological sites in Egypt, the Levant, Minoan sites in Crete, and even regions of the Eastern Mediterranean show isotopic signatures that precisely correspond to gold from Nubian mines. According to researchers specialized in ancient trade, this proves the existence of established trade routes with consistent patterns of exchange that operated on a continental scale. But it was not just gold. Copper from Timna appears in archaeological contexts thousands of kilometers away. Tin from still unknown sources circulated between civilizations. There was continuous demand. There was currency, or at least added value that justified large-scale operations, organization of caravans, coordination between regions. This implies something that traditional archaeology is reluctant to state clearly. There was a network of civilizations coordinated or in contact much more extensive, more sophisticated, and more organized than conventional written records suggest. We are not talking about peoples isolated in their regions. We are talking about interconnected systems of trade and knowledge. This is where the story takes a completely unexpected turn. Because if you follow the routes of ore trade, they lead not only to known cities, but also to places where no one would expect to find evidence of organized activity. In 2022, an analysis of archaeological data published by Stockholm University mapped the distribution routes of ancient copper and gold and discovered patterns that suggested coordinated operations in regions separated by thousands of kilometers. Mining operations were not random. There was pattern, there was system, there was something that kept everything connected. There is no complete consensus on how this worked, but the material evidence does not lie. Let us return to Timna for a moment, because there is something that few researchers mention when discussing Rothenberg's work. Among the artifacts found in the deepest layers of the mine, there were objects that did not appear to be from the region. Stones engraved with symbols that did not correspond to known symbols of the time. Pottery fragments that did not match local styles, materials that appeared to come from far away. Rothenberg interpreted this as evidence of contact with other regions and civilizations, but what if it meant something more? What if it meant that there was circulation of knowledge, of techniques, of methodologies between regions separated by entire deserts? Mining operations lasted not decades, but centuries. Some mines operated continuously for more than 500 years. To maintain a continuous operation for that long, you need administration that understands long-term planning, records that track production and demand, work specialization where miners were not occasional farmers, but trained professionals, technical knowledge that was transmitted from generation to generation, food security for workers during periods of intensive operation, transport logistics that could move tons of ore through deserts. All of this is present in archaeological records, but not in official written records. That is the discrepancy that conventional archaeology is reluctant to address completely. According to historians such as David Anthony from Hartwick University, who studied ancient trade, the evidence suggests that the ancient world was much more connected than we traditionally recognize. Trade routes were not novelties of the classical period. They existed thousands of years ago, functioning so efficiently that civilizations separated by continents could exchange not only merchandise, but also technical knowledge, ritual practices, and perhaps even writing. And here is the obscure detail that no one talks about. There are ancient records that mention these mining operations, but were interpreted as myth or exaggeration for centuries. Egyptian papyri that describe expeditions to regions distant and rich in gold, inscriptions that mention the mines of the ancestors, documents that seem to speak about operations that lasted generations. Why were these records treated as allegory instead of literal description? Perhaps because the implications were too great to be comfortable. If ancient civilizations could organize mining operations on a continental scale, if they had trade networks that connected regions separated by deserts and mountains, if they possessed technical knowledge of metallurgy, chemistry, and engineering that we presumed to be modern, if they could maintain operations running for centuries with efficiency that rivaled later periods, then the entire narrative about human progress needs to be reconsidered. We are not talking about fantasy. We have artifacts, we have structures, we have waste that can be analyzed, we have written records that speak about these things, but were ignored or misinterpreted. We have chronologies that do not fit and dates that raise uncomfortable questions about when organized civilization really began. What the forgotten mines reveal is that there exists a profound gap between what we know with certainty about the ancient past and what really happened. There are entire layers of history that do not appear in conventional papyri, in the inscriptions we selected to study, or in the texts we chose as canonical. There is material evidence that tells a different story, a story of people who planned with precision, who organized complex operations not for weeks or months but for generations, who maintained networks of knowledge that crossed oceans and deserts, who possessed specialization and technique that rivaled anything that would come after. And there is still more. Because while archaeologists study these known mines, other, even more disturbing discoveries are emerging in regions you would never imagine. There are mining operations being identified in places where the presence of organized civilizations should not be possible, according to our current chronology. There are structures being discovered at depths that suggest activity much older than anything we have recorded. There are patterns emerging that indicate that the mining system we are beginning to understand was only a small piece of something much, much larger. Continuing excavations in regions of Nubia, the Sinai Peninsula, and now in new areas identified through remote sensing technology are revealing discoveries that have not yet been fully documented or published. Because when you find something that challenges an entire historical chronology, the academic community does not rush to accept it. Official history is not rewritten overnight. But the mines continue to speak. The artifacts continue to tell their stories. The data continues to accumulate. And the question that remains is inevitable. What else are we interpreting wrong about the past? How many other structures, operations, and civilizations have been forgotten, covered up, or simply ignored because they did not fit the narrative that we believed was correct? And if our entire understanding of when civilization really began is fundamentally wrong. These are not abstract academic questions. They are questions that demand answers, and the answers may be waiting, still buried at some depth that we have not yet reached. But not for much longer, because the mines are being excavated, the mysteries are being unearthed, and when the entire story is finally revealed, it may be that we need to completely reconsider who we were, what we knew, and how we came to be what we are today.